Allison and I, Jack, have been married for 4 years. We are both in our 20s and we are thoroughly enjoying our married life. We have good work and we have plans. I work hard to get promoted to vice president and give it my all. Allison, a seamstress in a local factory, had her salary put aside for a deposit to buy a house. In about 6 months, we will be able to buy a house, and after my promotion, we will be able to live on one salary, and she will be able to stop working to have children. She loves children and wants more than anything to become a mother. She understands that we need to be financially secure, but if I didn't insist on this, she wouldn't care. It was a Friday in early April, and I got up early to go to work. Today is an important day in the fight for a promotion, as I have to present a new product that we are working on. There are 3 teams participating in the presentation, and it is understood that the presenter who wins the presentation will receive the position of vice president. We worked hard, and our performance was scheduled to take place at 10 o'clock in the morning. When I left the bathroom, Allison was already awake and said, "Good luck with your performance and don't forget to come home early. I want to invite you somewhere to celebrate and discuss something." I knew that after the presentation I would be exhausted and it would be difficult to leave early, but Allison was very forgiving of early mornings, late evenings, and all the other things that come with a lot of stress in a person's life. I am greatly indebted to her and look forward to good night. The performance went well, and the 2 senior board members congratulated me, indicating that we were very close to winning. When I arrived home around 5:30, I was in a great mood, and going up the stairs, I saw that my wife was dressed to the highest standards and ready to go out. Seeing her, I whistled and asked, "Where are we going?" She gave me an irresistible smile and replied, "To this new French restaurant. You worked so hard to secure our future that I thought you deserved something special." I'm more of a burger and fries person, but Allison wanted a special night out, and I could give it to her. Her plans clearly included some love, and I was looking forward to it. I went into the bathroom to freshen up and change clothes. I thought I heard Allison talking, but I left it as it was. The restaurant, with a large car park, was located just off Castle Street. It is small, but the food is delicious. I dined there about a month ago for a business meeting and was looking forward to an intimate evening. When we walked in, there were only 2 other couples there, and we were seated at the back in a quiet corner. We talked about the presentation and how it went. We chose appetizers and main courses from the menu, and when the waiter left our table, I noticed how an unfamiliar couple entered the room and, without waiting for the waiter, took a seat. I seemed to recognize him, but I couldn't realize. He is about 40, he is in good shape, and he clearly smells of money. She is 20, 21 at most, and she looks out of place. Too old to be his daughter, but too young to be his companion. In her hands is a large bag, from which she took out a tablet and several other items, then stood up and approached one of the couples. The conversation took a few minutes. She made some notes on her tablet and returned to their table. By this time, the man was already talking to the waiter as if they were friends. I also noticed that Allison was quiet and a little nervous. Besides, her phone was on the table, and we have a rule in our house: no phones at the dinner table. Something was wrong. The girl continued to approach other tables, spoke for a few minutes, took notes, then left. The man sat impassively, talking to the waiter, but clearly not placing an order, and I watched as my wife was clearly distracted by something. The girl came up to our table and said, "Hello, my name is Judy. I am a college psychology and ethics student conducting a survey for my senior thesis. Would you like to take part in it?" I looked at her and said, "Sorry, but my wife and I came for a special holiday, and I don't want to be disturbed. Perhaps if you give us your mobile number, we will call you back and do this another time." Her face showed complete confusion. It was as if she had been assured that I would not refuse, and she had no plans to refuse. My wife quickly intervened. "Jack, this girl needs our help. I'm sure we can give her a minute of our time." This was strange for my wife. She hated such wedging. I said, "Please, not now. We have so much to discuss." But she was persistent, saying, "Please ask your questions." I took a very deep breath, and then the first question came. "Have you seen the movie Indecent Proposal?" I answered, "No," but my wife said, "No, We haven't seen it, but we know the plot of the film. I really didn't like this girl, and when I looked at the man with whom she came, he interrupted the conversation with the waiter and was now watching our table, which he did not do with others. Judy looked at me, but I refused to look at her, and she said, "Jack, can I call you Jack? How do you feel about this proposal and its impact on marriage?" Unable to resist, I answered, "I have a feeling that you don't care whether I agree to be called that, but such a proposal, if my wife accepted it, would lead to an immediate divorce." Allison raised her head, but Judy didn't flinch. She asked it further, "Do you think that you have the right to control your wife's body by denying her such things?" I laughed. "In no case, my answer says that if she will accept the offer. I won't bother her, but while she's away minding her own business, I'll be in our house dividing bank accounts, packing my bags, and filing divorce papers." Judy then asked, "What if the offer was, say, $2 million? Wouldn't that keep you alive? If the offer was written so that you wouldn't get a penny if you divorced her, would you change your mind?" "She knows me well, Judy," I said, looking her straight in the eyes for the first time. "I earn enough for a living. I don't need to make money by selling my wife. And in general, if she had agreed to this money, I would have refused it during the divorce. Dirty money does not bring happiness. So no, this proposal will not change my actions. And now I need to go to the toilet and cancel our order. You ruined my mood, and I don't want to eat anymore. Alice, be ready to leave when I return." I quickly stood up and walked towards the toilets, has stopped at the waiter's counter and said, "Please cancel the reservation for our table. The people you let in got in our way, and I don't want to eat here anymore." The waiter looked at me. "But your bill is being paid by this gentleman for his assistance in conducting the survey." I was confused, so I just turned around and went to the toilet. I had a bad feeling and knew the other shoe was about to drop. Since my last visit to a restaurant, I knew that I could walk around the back of the toilet and stand in such a way as not to draw attention to myself. I stood and watched my wife type a text message on her phone. The man's phone beeped, he took it, and began typing. When he hit send, my wife's phone rang, she took it, read it, and typed the text, then his phone rang. I watched this for a few minutes, and it was quite obvious that they were texting. I returned to the table. "Who is this idiot with Judy?" Allison looked around and replied, "I don't know, but what?" "Oh, something's wrong. He just paid for our food." "I think I know him, but I can't identify him, and you seem to be having a conversation with him by correspondence," I said, as if it was something taken for granted. Allison, with a look that irrefutably indicated that she had been seen through, stammered, "He was just trying to be polite after she interrupted our meal." I answered, "I'm in a bad mood and have lost my appetite. It's time for us to leave." Allison became worried and suggested, "No, we can't be that rude. Just sit here and rest, and I'll go to the toilet." I watched her leave and noticed that she glanced at the man. Then Judy came up to me and sat down, putting her hand on the table next to mine and saying, "One more question. What figure do you consider reasonable?" I laughed and put my hand on hers. She didn't remove it. I said, "It doesn't matter whether he sells his body for $20 or $2 million. The fact remains a fact. Then no amount will help." Having said this, I began to squeeze her hand. Her hands were thin and mine were thick, so the pressure became painful very quickly. She said, "Stop it immediately." I answered, "Not until you tell me what I want to know." By this time, I was close to breaking one of her fingers, and I stopped pressing but did not let go of my hand. She said, "If you don't stop, I'll scream." I just smiled. "Go ahead, but I'm willing to bet you won't because there's something wrong here, and I doubt you'll want the hassle of calling the police. Tell me, who is he?" She tried to pull her hand away, and I squeezed it again. This time the finger cracked under pressure, and she began to cry. I continued to press, and then a man ran up. I shouted, "Stand still, or the same thing will happen to the rest of your fingers." He stopped, and then my wife came up. "What's happening?" I smiled. "Well, Allison, that's exactly what I'm trying to find out. Judy, if you want to keep your hand beautiful, I suggest you answer my question now." With tears in her eyes, she replied, "Simon Armitage, Jr. I let go of her hand. "Get out of here and never come near me again." I looked at Simon Armitage Jr. and realized who he was. Simon Armitage is the owner of the factory where Allison works, and this is obviously his eldest son. I met him at a few events, but he was a lowlife who only got the job running the factory because of his father. He has a reputation as a playboy, and there are rumors that he pursues married women because he believes it makes him a big man. Allison came and sat down. Simon offered us $2 million if I would spend the weekend with him. I agreed because it will provide for us for life. We'll be able to buy a new house without a mortgage, set up college trust funds for the kids, and start working on our baby this coming weekend. We won't need to wait for your promotion. I silently looked at the table. "Did you agree?" She replied, "Yes," just as Simon Armitage Jr. sat down at the table. I didn't move or look at him. Then he said, "I can make all your dreams come true, and all it will cost you is 48 hours of your wife's time. The agreement is very simple. I will transfer $2 million into your joint account on Sunday evening when she calls me to confirm that you are still home. If you leave, I'll open an account for Allison that you won't be able to touch. Choose for yourself." I looked at Allison but spoke to him. "You can stick your $2 million where the sun doesn't shine. If my wife wants to become a prostitute, I don't need her or the money. I'm leaving. If she's in the car, we can still restore our marriage. But if she's not there, I'll pack my things and leave long before she returns. So, Allison, it's time to decide." Allison looked at me defiantly. "Jack, I want a child now, not in another 2 years. As long as you can provide financing, this gives us this opportunity, and you're going to miss it." I laughed, which seemed to unnerve her somewhat. "We won't have children in the foreseeable future. This little prank has damaged my trust in you so much that even if you left with me now, we would have years of counseling. If you go with him, then I will never touch you." I stood up, dropping my napkin on the food I had just brought, and said, "I'm leaving, Allison. Time to decide." I walked out, and the idiot tried to stand up, but lost his balance when I put my hand on his forehead, pushed him back into his seat, and watched him fall backwards. I continued walking, and the waiter stood in front of me, but I raised my hand, as if pushing him away, and he silently stepped back. I heard Allison scream my name as the door closed behind me. I cheerfully walked up to the car, opened the door, and got in. I took a few deep breaths, letting the tension drain from my body, and only then started the engine. He drove slowly past the restaurant, Allison still there. I increased my speed and drove home. He took out his suitcase from the closet shelf and began to pack. On autopilot, I packed all my clothes and toiletries into several suitcases and black bags within an hour. Then the phone rang, and it was Allison. She said, "How are you, baby? I'm very sorry that it all turned out this way, but this offer is too good to refuse. I'll turn off the phone now and see you on Sunday around 7. I said nothing, just pressing the phone to my ear. The silence was obviously painful for her, but I felt numb. She's really going to do this because she thinks it will be good for us. Then she said, "Look, we can discuss this on Sunday when I get back. I want to give birth to a child as soon as possible, and this will protect his life." I just asked, "And who will be the father?" She was taken aback, but answered, "You, of course." "Not in this life," and I hung up. I packed all my things, including other personal things, into the car. I went to the internet bank, went to the deposit account at home and withdrew half. Then he went to the online divorce service, filled out the application, paid the fee, and agreed that Allison would be served on Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning. When I left the house for the last time, a car pulled up, and Allison jumped out of it screaming, "Stop, Jack, stop!" It was just a prank, a belated April Fool's joke. The driver turned out to be an asshole. He got out of the car and said, "It was a joke. We thought you would return to the restaurant. We were there for the last 2 hours. Then Allison received your divorce letter and we hurried back. I looked at Allison silently. If this is a joke, then it was so unsuccessful that it caused irreparable damage to our marriage. I need to get away from here for a couple of days and think. With these words, I got into my car. As I started the engine, I heard her scream, "Please withdraw the divorce papers." On Saturday afternoon, I was sitting at my brother's house with him and his wife, Becky. Becky had spoken to Allison a few hours earlier and came back to tell us about it. "Jack," she began, "I don't think it was a joke, but it certainly wasn't an attempt to sleep with another man. She wants to have children so desperately that she would do anything. On the other hand, she didn't really intend to go through with it. Her idea was to get you to say that you have enough money to take care of her, and then she could say, 'Well, if you have enough money, then you shouldn't wait to have kids.' He's her friend at work, but believe me, he's not even remotely interested in having sex with Allison. In fact, he probably would have preferred you, but now she realizes that she herself created the situation where you lost all trust in her, thinks that if you just had the baby, all the love and trust would return. The question is, can you do it? This is a killer question. Ever since Allison's best friend got pregnant 6 months ago, she's been asking me when we can have kids. The problem is that delaying this means I'm not sure about everything, and I definitely don't want to bring a child into a dysfunctional family. I got up from the table and went to bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon so that I could think. By Sunday, my mind had not cleared. My real problem is with these 2 watches. If there really was a setup or a joke or an attempt to impose her point of view about the child, she would immediately return home. The fact that she didn't do this means she has something to talk to Simon about. I also didn't buy the "Simon would prefer you" statement. I decided that they should file for divorce. What will be, will be. Since the events, a month has passed. Allison, with Simon's help, found a lawyer, and the court ordered 12 consultations over 4 weeks, 3 per week. We sat in front of the counselor, a young woman who looked at me like my first-grade teacher did when I couldn't read the entire alphabet. Allison vying with each other about her plan and how Simon came up with it. Ironically, Judy was actually a psychology student writing a paper on how men react to stressful situations. I was supposed to be her iconic example. When Allison finished, the consultant looked at me and almost spat out the words, "Well, Jack, you heard the whole story. Why do you persist in divorce when your wife wants and needs you?" To her, I thought, Jack wills rinse brains 3 times a week for the next 4 weeks. I looked to the consultant in eyes and said, "Do you really believe this? Because I personally don't believe it. There is a 2-hour black hole on her account. What she did from the moment I left the restaurant until she returned home. Enough time to get a room, have sex, come up with a plan, and return home." I heard Allison take a deep breath, and the consultant sat up in her chair. When she started talking, I said, "I haven't finished yet, and we agreed not to interrupt when others are speaking. So I expect you to follow these rules." She never discussed those 2 hours, gave no explanation, or provided any evidence. What happened in those 2 hours is the real story of that evening. "But you are only talking about his preparation." The consultant was outraged. "You need to get over this, and then you and your wife can resume your marriage." I stood up and said, "Your job is to find out if our marriage can be saved, not to try to persuade me to stay in a marriage that I want to leave. If she doesn't prove to me that nothing happened during these 2 hours, I will leave here." The consultant reported me to the judge for being uncooperative, and 2 days later I was back in court. The judge looked me up and down as if he was examining something he had scraped off his shoe. "Why do you refuse to cooperate with a consultant?" I answered, "Perhaps you should listen to the recording of the first session. The counselor said that I should forget about Allison's misdeed. Your Honor, it is not the consultant's job to lecture me. I need to know the truth about that evening, and both my wife and the consultant are trying to hide it. Collaboration is a 2-way street. If they refuse to answer my questions, then I cannot fulfill their request to forgive my wife because I do not know what she did." The judge thought for a moment and then asked, "What do you want to know?" I quickly replied, "It's simple. There is a 2-hour black hole in her timeline that she refuses to discuss. I want to know what happened then. My wife refuses to discuss it, and the consultant says I don't need to know. I'm here today because the counselor wants you to tell me to stop asking this question because, in her opinion, by asking this question, I am being uncooperative. The judge rubbed his chin, looking like a 1920s movie star, then said, "You have the right to know. Please sit down." I asked the consultant to act as a witness. My wife's lawyer, who was there with the consultant, stood up and said, "Your Honor, she is not involved in this case. She has her own job to do, and she just wants Mr. Samuels to stop being obstructive. Bringing her in as a witness won't help this." The judge was clearly outraged by this statement and said, "This lawsuit was brought by your client and her consultant, alleging that Mr. Samuels was uncooperative. I see that Mrs. Samuels is refusing to cooperate, and the consultant is covering for her. Either she testifies or I stop counseling and grant the divorce. What do you choose?" The lawyer and the consultant argued very heatedly, but in the end the consultant, with some reluctance, stood up and walked to the podium. She took the oath, and the judge asked, "Do you know what happened during these 2 hours?" The consultant sat silently until the judge said, "Madam, I remind you that you are under oath and must answer this question." Quietly, so that I could barely hear, she answered, "Yes, I know." The judge tapped his finger on the table, waiting for her to speak, and when she did not, he said, "Please enlighten the court about what happened there, and speak up this time." Mrs. Samuels and Mr. Armitage went to a bar next door where they discussed what had happened and how they planned to deal with the aftermath. Mrs. Samuels believed that the proposal made to her and Mr. Samuels by Mr. Armitage was the fastest way to the large family she dreamed of. She expected Mr. Samuels to come back and look for her, but when he sent the divorce notice, she panicked and decided that she shouldn't have put the proposal on the table to see if Mr. Samuels would accept it. Now she understands that it was a mistake and wants to forget about all this and move on with her life. My role, as the consultant assigned to Mrs. Samuels, is to make it clear to Mr. Samuels that this was just a suggestion, and if he declines it, she will forget about it. The judge laughed and said, "Do you understand what you are saying? You are not assigned to Mrs. Samuels to force Mr. Samuels to comply with her request. You have been appointed by the court to see if their marriage can be saved." At this point, the consultant interrupted, saying, "But if he can move past the proposal and admit that it was rejected, then the marriage will survive." The judge looked over his glasses and said, "Consultant, I am stopping these meetings because you are not acting independently. Mr. Samuels," he turned to me, "what do you want from this hearing?" My lawyer looked at me, then stood up and said, "My client wants the divorce to take place." Allison's lawyer practically jumped out of his seat. "Your Honor, you cannot stop the hearing on this basis. It must continue." "My client wants this marriage continued." The judge looked at him and said, "If you had played fair, I would have done so, but you turned the consultation into a mockery by trying to hide important information from Mr. Samuels. I don't agree with this. I approve of the divorce." An hour later, I arrived home to find Allison sitting on the doorstep in tears. "Why, Jack? All I wanted was a big family, and this was just a means to an end." I took her hand and pulled her into the house. "You set me up, lied to me, and treated me like a fool. You know that this proposal was unacceptable, but you even tried to fulfill it. I could never be with a woman who did this to me." She continued to cry, saying, "But I want us to be together. I want 4 children from you, and so that we don't need anything." I just shook my head. "Go and get your $2 million and then find someone who will give you your children. What about me? I could never be with a woman who thinks that's acceptable. Goodbye, Allison." I opened the door and walked out into a new world. Whether he will be better, who knows? Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.